welcome. Thank you so much for showing up for our first Library After Dark event. Thank you. I'm Roz Templin. I work here, a lot of you know that. And I'm so happy that we have such a great turnout. And I've got a little spiel that I'm going to read for you. So let's see. Welcome again. This is our music icons, Henry Diltz, John Van Hamersveld in conversation with Stephen Peoples as our moderator. We're honored to present a photographer and a multidisciplinary graphic designer whose work is vastly different, but they also have a lot in common. Both Henry Diltz and John Van Hamersveld are contemporary artists who have been outstanding in their respective fields since the 1960s. Their respective work is known widely and respected around the world, even if they're not household names. But in pop culture, music, and art, our universe, Henry Diltz and John Van Hamersveld are revered, even idolized, as true icons. I think so. Known to their many friends and associates by their nicknames, Tad and Hammer, Henry and John have had enormous influence on their peers and those who attempt to follow, including tonight's moderator. And Stephen Peoples, joining the fray as our moderator. Stephen grew up surfing in South Florida, soaking up Hammer's work in Surfer and Surfing Illustrated magazines, and playing his drums along with music by Henry's pals, the Byrds, and Buffalo Springfield. I guess you guys might know who they are, huh? Chasing the California dream, Stephen's family moved to LA in 1968 when he was 16. A few years later, he broke into the music industry as a media guy, and over the next few decades worked at Capitol Records, Elektra Asylum, the Westwood One Radio Network, Rhino Entertainment, and Warner Music Group. Aren't we fortunate to have someone like this tonight? Yes. Stephen co-produced the Grammy-nominated box set of music from the Monterey International Pop Festival, was a writer-producer of Westwood One's The Lost Lennon Tapes radio series, and more recently worked in television as a writer-producer and on-air host. At Capitol in 1978, Stephen introduced Henry to a co-worker, Peter Blatchley. In 2001, Henry would partner with Pete and friend Rich Horowitz to found Morrison Hotel Galleries. 10 years later, Stephen was the editorial director of Henry's book, Unpainted Faces, published by the Gallery, now in New York, Hollywood, and Hawaii, and representing the works of Henry and more than 125 fine art music photographers. In 1983 at Westwood One, Stephen produced a massive 10th anniversary company advertorial that was published by Billboard. He worked with John Van Hamersveld, who designed the book's corporate, cool front and back covers and laid out the interior pages. Right now, Stephen is writing a biography of Texas art law, Boyd Elder. I think a lot of you know who Boyd is, don't you? He's a contemporary of Henry's, John's, and Stephen's. Boyd's best known for his painted animal skulls adorning covers of multi-million selling albums by the Eagles and others. Welcome, Stephen.
Well, thank you, Roz. And it's great to be here. I have to say that it's a pleasure beyond belief because I've idolized both of these guys at a distance, and then over the course of my career got to meet and work with them. So it's been really a lot of fun. We're going to lead off. We did a little coin toss before the show here, and Henry's going to lead off. So let me introduce Henry first. Henry is a photographer, author, and entrepreneur who's world famous for his iconic images of musicians, especially the Laurel Canyon scene of the mid-'60s to the mid-'70s. His images have been published around the world in books, magazines, newspapers, and eventually on DVD and the web from the 1960s to this day. He's probably best known for among the few hundred album covers that he shot, include Crosby, Stills and Nash's first album, The Doors' Morrison Hotel, James Taylor's Sweet Baby James, 2 albums for the Mamas and the Papas, Jackson Browne's first album, Eagles' debut LP and Desperado, and 6 for the group America. He was one of the official photographers of the Monterey International Pop Festival in June '67, along with Jim Marshall, and the official photographer at all 3 Woodstock Music and Art Fairs in '69, '94, and '99. In his nearly 60-year career, Henry's been behind the lens for hundreds of sessions and adventures with artists, including the Lovin' Spoonful, the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Mama Cass Elliot, Linda Ronstadt, Richard Harris, the Turtles. It just goes on forever. Steppenwolf, Richard Pryor, the Rolling Stones, Paul McCartney and Wings, Garth Brooks, Bruce Springsteen. You get the picture. But unlike most other rock photographers, Henry started out as a musician. He basically fell into photography. He was born in Kansas City, Missouri, coincidentally so was I, but grew up in far-flung locales as the son of a globe-trotting State Department employee. In 1962, while in college in Hawaii, Henry picked up the banjo and was a co-founder of the Modern Folk Quartet. Over the next few years, the Acoustic Folkies recorded a couple of albums for Warner Brothers and toured the nation's clubs, colleges, and concert circuits. The famous Phil Spector famously produced MFQ's single, This Could Be the Night, in 1965. The same year, Henry played banjo on Bob Lynn's Elusive Butterfly. But when MFQ's big single was not a hit, the band decided to call it quits. It was on the last MFQ tour, in fact, in 1966, that Henry scored his first camera and started to take pictures of his friends, who all happened to be soon-to-be famous musicians. Well, Henry's a way better storyteller than I, so I'm going to throw it to you. Henry, take it away. Henry Diltz.
Right here? Is that good? Okay, gosh, I don't know what to say after that, Stephen. How could one guy do all that? One day at a time. And it was an accident, really. I mean, I didn't mean to be a photographer at all. And, people come up and say, thank you for taking all those pictures. And I think, well, holy cow, I really just took them for myself. It was just my day, my fun, hanging out with my friends, taking pictures. Wait, go back one, okay? Yeah. No, that's too far. That first one there with the Buffalo Springfield. Yeah, my first real rock and roll photo, I was walking down the hill in Laurel Canyon where I lived as a musician for 5 years and then as a photographer for 10 years. And right after I bought a camera, I was walking down the hill, I heard guitar music coming out of a little bungalow. I went up to the door and Stephen Still there, second from the right, was just there at a friend's house playing the guitar. He said, Henry, you want to come to Hermosa Beach with us today, or Huntington Beach? It was Huntington Beach. We're doing a sound check at a folk club. And I thought, yeah, I would love to, because I wanted to go down on the beach while they did the sound check and take pictures of people on the beach for my slideshows. Really, I hadn't so much thought about taking music photos. I mean, I photographed my friends, and then, so I went down to the beach and I got a great shot of a guy with a monkey on his shoulder. And it was one of my favorite slides. They kind of looked similar, little beard and all. And then I walked back to this club where they were doing their sound check inside. I mean, I couldn't have shot in there anyway. It was probably dark. I didn't even go in there. I didn't even think I should take their picture. In fact, I walked back to the club and I was just focusing on this big mural. I thought I did slideshows from my stoned hippie friends in Laurel Canyon. So I like to get colors and things. And I was just framing up that big mural and they walked out the back door. And I said, hey, stand there a minute, you guys, so I can show how big that mural is. And I did, really, honest to God. And I took a few, they posed, and then they started doing some shtick. We took a roll of film, and that was it. And then 2 weeks later, Teen Set magazine called, said, "We hear you have a picture of the Buffalo Springfield, you know?" I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, we'd like to run it and we'll pay you $100. And I went, wow. So that was the first, time anyone ever offered to pay me. And I thought, wow, well, that's interesting. Okay, next up. So then I did go to New York to photograph the Lovin' Spoonful. And on the way back, I got a call from another teeny bopper magazine, Tiger Beat. And the guy on the phone said, "Oh, we'd like to hire you for the day to go down to the Monkees where they record their video, their show. And we'll pay you for the day and we'll keep all the film and you can." So I went down that day and I met these guys. I didn't really know them, but I was roughly their age and I had love beads and kind of long hair. And so I got to be real good friends with them and I really became their photographer throughout the whole second season and on the road in '67 on their summer tour. Okay. This is Mama Cass, who we now call her the Gertrude Stein of Laurel Canyon. Because she was always introducing artists to each other. She would have, when I was in New York with the Spoonful, she called up one day and said, "Will you be there for a few minutes? I want to bring some friends by." And she brought the Hollies by. And they'd never met each other. And so my first album cover was The Lovin' Spoonful. And my second album cover was the Hollies, really because of Mama Cass. She was such a great lady. This was supposed to be an album cover, but it became a big billboard on Sunset Strip instead. Yeah. What do you mean? About the setup. Oh, okay. Well, incidentally, I want to say I'm so proud to be here with John Van Hamersveld because I love his work. And being a photographer is really only half, of like doing album covers and posters. It takes a good graphic artist to make it look good, to use it right. And I had a partner, Gary Burden, who was a fantastic graphic artist. And yeah. And he would get these great ideas, these adventures we would go on. And he said, "We're going to go down to Palm Springs." We left in a limo at like 2 a.m, got there just as day was breaking, and went out on these sand dunes to take this picture. Gary had this thing in his mind. We stopped by a supermarket and bought onions and grapes and peaches. And so we were there just when the sun was coming up. And by the time we were ready to shoot, it was 105 degrees, and her makeup was running down her face. So we had to go check into the Gene Autry Motor Hotel and sit around the pool all day until magic hour, 5 o'clock. And so we finally got that shot. Linda Ronstadt, when she was I knew her as a fellow musician, somebody that, we all hung out at the Troubadour Club almost every single night, and it was kind of a little club. We all knew each other. We all, lived in Laurel Canyon and went to the same clubs and supermarkets and all. So she was a good friend of mine. I think she was, I don't know if she was 20 there yet. It was during the Stone Ponies times, and she went around barefoot all the time. This was outside her little bungalow in Santa Monica. Joni Mitchell up in Laurel Canyon. That is the house of our house is a very, very, very fine house. That was it. And we walked up there, Gary and I, and we both knew her, and they needed publicity photos, which we later took up behind the house. But as we walked up, she was just leaning in the windows, waiting for us. Said, "Good morning, guys." And so Gary, my partner, graphic artist partner, walked up and had about a 5 or 10 minute conversation with her, leaving me to shoot all these candid photos of that. So, if it wasn't for Gary, she would have ducked in the house. We would have walked up in the back. Those pictures weren't nearly as good as these pictures when we walked up. Yeah. James Taylor. I don't have the color shot. The record company lost that, but I just love that picture. And incidentally, I'm a huge fan of all these people. Sweet Baby James. I sang that to both of my little children, putting them to sleep, I love that song, Sweet Baby James, which, of course, I didn't hear until after the album came out. We just were taking pictures here at my friend Cyrus Fariar's farm, kind of an intellectual commune. And I love, that's one of my favorite portraits. Here's Jackson Browne, also one of the all-time singer-songwriters. I mean, I'm his biggest fan. I love to hang out with Jackson. It's fun to. One time we did pictures in his doorway, and he doesn't usually have a lot of expressions. I mean, he kind of laughs easily, but when I got the pictures back, and he said, what do they look like? And I said, well, frankly, they look a little waxen, because he was kind of just standing there. They look waxen. And he said, oh, he said, can I use that word? It's hard to find a rhyme for Jackson. But this day we were doing this, this was for Late for the Sky. And there's a little tiny picture of his face on the back of Late for the Sky, but none of this. And we had to borrow this 55 Chevy from a girlfriend of his, and she's waiting in the back seat. This is America. These guys are really pals of mine. Steven said I did about 6 album covers, I guess, something like that. Each one was a real adventure. And this one we rode horseback into an Indian reservation down by San Diego. And Gary wanted to bring that mirror with us, you know, and his idea was we'd lay it on the ground and they would look into it and it would like be a hole in the ground, like I would be looking up at them or something. I thought, well, you know, that's not going to work. But we got there that evening, and the cowboy wrangler, our guide, had to ride horseback for 2 hours with that thing under his arm. So the first evening we got there to this little oasis, Dewey in the front said, I want to go up and watch the bats fly around. And Gary said, why don't you all go and take that mirror? And I said, what? You know. But so then they were way up on the top of a hill, and I had a 500 millimeter lens. And I mean, they were as far as the back of the room. And I could see light jumping in that mirror when they walked. And I said, wait a minute, you know, stop for a minute. And it was the moon coming up on the far side of the valley. And that was one of their covers. Back, I think it was the back. Gary Burden wanted that damn picture of them looking in the mirror, you know, on the mirror on the ground, and so that was going to be the cover. But Jerry Beckley, one of my best friends at the back there, he and I said, "Oh no, that's the picture." So one time we ever really had a disagreement on that, and so Gary made the album with the little the opening on top, so it would be a two-sided album cover. Here's the Eagles out in Joshua Tree. So, you know, I really document. I'm fascinated with people. I like to hang out with people, watch them, take pictures of them. So a guy like Gary to be my partner was perfect because he would say, you know, we're going to go out to Joshua Tree and spend the night. And he would get all the, you know, Corona beer, and he'd get the, you know, peyote buttons. And he would say, just shoot everything that happens. Film's the cheapest part. And that was true. And I would photograph everything that happened. But this was early in the morning. We just climbed this mountain in Joshua Tree. We've been up all night since the Troubadour closed at 2 a.m. Got there at 5:30, climbed up the hill just as the sun came up. Yeah. And then they did their Desperado album, and they needed pictures. So, you know, Gary knew where this old derelict western town was in Agoura in the Malibu Hills. And we went out. There's J.D. Souther is in the striped coat. The guy right in the middle with the white shirt and the vest kind of back there, that's Gary, my graphic artist partner. And Jackson Browne was there that day. And basically it was like 1872, even though it was 1972. And we just played cowboys all day, and I just kept snapping away. Boyd was there too, Boyd Elder, right? Yeah, that's right. Wait, go back one. Where is that?
Just to To the right of Gary, up on the horse.
That's right. Yeah, that's Boyd Elder right there.
Yeah, that guy.
The guy who did the cow skull decoration. Yeah. Yeah, everybody was there. We had a great time playing. In fact, we went back the next day and did it again. It was so much fun. They shot up all the blank ammunition in an hour. And so he got 10 times that much, and we went back the second day. There they are, backing out of the bank, with their guns blazing. Yeah, the fire department came because the smoke rose up in the air. So J.D. Souther had a book of Western outlaw heroes, and we looked in it, and it showed the posse posing with the dead outlaws. So we sort of imitated that. They'd tie them up like, so many jackrabbits or coyotes. And so there's J.D. Souther here on the right, and way on the other end is Jackson Brown. He has a little mustache. And there's Boyd Elder right smack in the middle, rolling a cigarette or joint. And Gary Burden, my graphic artist partner, has got the rifle on the far end there. Yeah, great fun. Here's Neil. Gary and I would go up to Neil's. See, Gary and I both knew all these people. I mean, we knew Joni and Cass and Neil, all of these people. So it was easy for us to hang out with them and kind of be natural. And so that's why we got to do so many of these album covers. We'd go up and spend a weekend up at Neil's ranch. And then we'd walk around in the morning and smoke a joint and kind of, about 9 o'clock in the morning and walk around and check out the whole ranch. And we were doing that, and we stopped in a little barn. We were in the back of the barn, and when I turned around, Neil was out looking down the street, looking down the dirt road, and that's his cattle on the hillside. That was great. And his little dog, Hart, H-A-R-T-E, named after Bret Hart, the cowboy short story writer. I think, is that right, Ross? This is a library, right? I should get that right.
Talk a little louder, we can't hear you.
Is that right? Oh, okay. Well, is that right? Yeah, Neil Young, in that same little barn. Yeah, he'd come to show us this little Martin guitar. And this was going to be maybe one of these shots, sitting on the hay bale playing. And I took them wide angle and close up. I probably took, 50 or 60 shots, black and white and color. And it was maybe going to be the cover of Harvest. But Gary had a big argument with Neil. And Neil's a Scorpio. He's very definite, and easy to have a disagreement with. And Gary was a proud Spaniard, and so they would sometimes lock horns. And so Gary, I don't know, went somewhere, They didn't talk to each other for a month, and the album came out, it just said Harvest, without a picture. Gary never finished it. Here we are at breakfast. This is the kind of picture I like to take, just whatever is happening in front of me, So that was having a breakfast in the morning in Malibu. Eagles t-shirt she's wearing here, I think. Yeah, E-A-G-E, right. This was at Bangladesh, the concert for Bangladesh. And I didn't have a photo pass, but my friend Chip Monk was doing the lighting and staging. His name was Edward Beresford Monk. And of course, his friends called him Chip. So Chip Monk. He did all the lighting for Woodstock, for Monterey Pop, many of the folk shows I did in the early 60s. And he said, Henry, you should come to this concert. And I said, well, I don't have a pass, Chip. I don't know the Beatles. I don't know those guys. And he said, well, come in the afternoon, and I'll give you a crew pass. And you hide your cameras under my lighting board, which I did. And so when Dylan came out, I had to be real discreet because I would get kicked out, but I got that shot. Yeah, great fun. Great people to hang out with. And I met Linda in a photo lab in New York long before she even met Paul. And we kind of struck up an acquaintance, and we went to lunch a few times. And then I was amazed to see she married Paul McCartney. I read about it. And then about a year later, she called me and wanted me to come out to their house in Malibu. They needed a picture of both of them, because now they were putting a Wings record out. and they needed for a songbook and stuff. And so we took pictures all day by the pool, and it was great fun to watch Paul writing songs, sitting there singing. His little girls held hands and jumped into the pool, and he was playing the ukulele, and he just started singing, "Two little sisters jumping in the pool." And I thought, wow, you know, it was a better melody than that. It was really pretty. I said, there's a Beatles song, I'll never hear. And then when that record came out, who's that knocking at the door? You know, I know he was sitting in the living room with his feet on the coffee table, and there was a knock at the door. And he just started singing, you know, sister, go, auntie, what is it? Auntie, sister man, go, open the door and let him in. I mean, it's just like he would just be singing that as it was happening. And then later, Linda said, we need to see these early in the morning because the lady from Life magazine needs to fly back to New York with one picture for the cover of Life magazine. So that was my accidental cover of Life. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. And there's an early selfie. The two daughters, Heather and Mary, in the back. Stella wasn't born yet. Okay. There's Stephen Stills, who was a real good friend of mine because when he was just singing in little coffee houses, 19 years old, my group, the Modern Folk Quartet, was singing at the Village Gate. And he would come down in Greenwich Village, and he would come every night and stand there by the bandstand and listen to our harmony. So we became good friends. I went to Colorado with him, and overnight it snowed, which was a big surprise in the morning. And Stephen grabbed his guitar and said, come on, quick, get your camera. And we ran outside. He wanted a picture in the snow. Then he said, wait a minute. And he ran back in the house and got that pink giraffe and set it down. So I went click, click, click. Okay, Stephen, we got the giraffe, we can lose that now. No, I want this in the picture, he said. So I thought, but then he picked it out for an album cover, and now I like that giraffe. Here's CSN on the couch. They were, once again, good friends of ours. They needed some kind of a picture for publicity. So we drove around Hollywood, West Hollywood, and we found that little couch. Graham had seen this little house with a couch, and we stopped there. We were just taking publicity pictures, and the big story is that we had a slideshow a few days later, and everyone said, boy, that would make a good album cover, except a day or two ago, we finally decided we're going to be Crosby, Stills, Nash, not Stills, Nash, and Crosby. So somebody said, well, just flip it over, and then they'll be in the right order, but then Stephen will be playing backwards. So I said, let's just go back. It'll take 5 minutes. Jump on the couch, click, click, click. We all got in the car and drove back, and the house was gone. So that's what was used, the Nash Stills. That's not the exact picture, but almost, yeah. And then here's the Morrison Hotel. There's a bit of a story. I mean, the guy inside the lobby wasn't going to let us shoot. We walked in there, and he said, no, you can't shoot in here unless you have the landlord's permission. I said, well, okay, we'll stand in front of the window then. Come on, guys, we got to go outside. And then as we got out there, I saw that light go on, and I looked back in there. I said, oh, it's the elevator light. The guy from the desk has gone up in the elevator. Quick, run in there. And that really is what happened. And they hit those places. It was December '69. There's a Christmas tree there. No, it was a flop house, rooms, $2.50. Yeah. And of course, as always happens, we have a guest appearance. I love it when a kid on a bike rides through the album cover or something. Yeah, okay. Then Jim said, let's get a drink. So we went a few blocks to Skid Row and found the Hard Rock Cafe. No one had ever heard that before. We took a bunch of pictures. In fact, we went inside, and Jim would buy beer for these guys and listen to their stories. There we are at the bar, some of his friends. In fact,
looks like he's been there for a while.
Yeah, maybe. We were there for a while. And Jim would buy beers for these winos because he wanted to hear their stories of life. You know, left home at 16, joined the Merchant Marines. Because he was a poet. He liked to hear people's lives, you know. And in fact, so afterwards, outside, here's Jim with his new friends. I mean, they didn't know who he was or anything about him, you know, but just a nice guy. Okay, yes. So I'm ending with some shots from Woodstock. I did get hired. The same guy, Chip Monk, called me. I was in Laurel Canyon. He said, Henry, we're having a big show out here in New York in a few weeks. You ought to be out here. And I said, well, Chip, I've heard about it, but I don't know those guys. He said, I'll talk to the producer. The next day, Michael Lang called, man of few words. He said, Chip says we need you. I'm sending you $500 and an airplane ticket. And that was it, and I flew out. And that's what I saw 2 weeks before. They were quickly building the stage in the new location at Yasgur's farm, right down at the bottom of this hill, this green alfalfa growing. And it was like they were building a battleship. It was this big plywood deck. And all that alfalfa was about a foot high. And it would blow in the wind. It was just like being at sea every day. It was like summer camp or something. And in the next one, and so that's what it was like to just be standing around there all day. And at lunchtime, the girls from the office would bring sandwiches and drinks, and it was really like summer camp. And then one day, I saw a few people up in the middle of that field, and I thought, what are those people sitting there for? Oh, gosh, I forgot. It's going to be a concert. And then the next day there were thousands, and then 450,000 people. And there's John Sebastian, who wasn't on the bill. He lived in Woodstock, and he came over that day to see his friends on stage, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and those guys. And he decided to take some LSD that day. So he was pretty high, and he got on stage, and the next act had not arrived in the helicopter. Someone shoved a guitar in his hand and said, quick, run out there, sing something. 450 people were waiting, half an hour. And he went out there and did the most beautiful set of his life. I always said he talked to that crowd like it was his best friend. And I heard more recently, after the 50-year anniversary, when I did some interviews with him, he described it. He said, yeah, you know how you sit across the table with some of your friends and pass the joint back and forth? It was like that, only much huger. And then the quintessential moment for me was Monday morning when Jimi Hendrix played the Star-Spangled Banner, which was very startling, like, why? Wait a minute, why is he playing? I was quite near, from here to that chair over there. And why is he singing that song? That's their song, not our song. Because we were against the government, we were peace and love hippies, against the war, against all of that stuff. Nothing changes, right? But so for him to play, and I thought, well, that's odd to play. And then I thought, wait a minute, it's our song. We're claiming it back. He's playing it, for us. Oh, it's great. And, years later, I thought, he played all that, the machine guns and airplanes and bombs going off and all that sound effects, which makes it so startling. And just the one string playing and echoing in the morning air was so amazing. And years later, I thought, when Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, he was watching Fort McHenry bombarded by the English frigates. And he was hearing, whistles and booms and seeing red rockets in the air. And so Jimmy was just bringing it back, kind of. I really do wonder why he played that. He was a paratrooper. He could play that. Was he saying that, because we all hated the idea of war and killing somebody. And I don't know, his conga player friend said he practiced 2 weeks to play that. So he really meant something by it, but... All right, well, that's my little rap.
Henry Diltz. Well, I'm equally pleased to welcome John Van Hamersveld to the fray this evening. John's a 1959 graduate of El Segundo High School, so he's a total local. He went on to study at the Art Center and the Chouinard Institute, and he's internationally famous in pop culture for his designs of commercial packaging and campaigns for record covers and artists. In his career of 60 years and counting, from surf photography and poster and ad design to psychedelic album covers and posters to big events and corporate brand identity projects, John's created an instantly recognizable and highly influential graphic design style. His body of work represents a vivid visual history of the era of cool in Southern California in a style he calls post-future. For Baltimore-born Van Hamersveld, whose family moved to the South Bay when he was 9 in 1950, it all started with skateboards, surfing, surf-related graphics, and dyslexia, diagnosed when he was in high school. John came of age as a surfer, partly part of the late 50s, early 60s gang of kids at Peavy's Bluff Cove and Torrance Beach who idolized Malibu surfer Mickey Dora, the Cat. Hammer combined his own passions for surfing, photography, and design when he published his own surfing magazine, Surfing Illustrated, in 1962. He then joined Surfer magazine as the assistant to publisher John Severson. It was a connection made via John's friend Rick Griffin when Rick was drawing the Murphy comic strips for Surfer. Rick and John were very close friends and artistic co-conspirators for the rest of their lives, or the rest of Rick's life, as John will probably tell you a little bit more about later. John created his first large format surf poster for his friend Bing Copeland and Bing Surfboards, also in 1962. And in 1963, while he was still attending the Art Center in Pasadena, he also created the Endless Summer film poster for surf filmmaker Bruce Brown. And the circumstances how that came about, it's a great story you'll hear from John. The movie, of course, popularized surfing everywhere, but the poster also set a style that revolutionized pop art, graphics, and advertising. The poster's featured now in the Museum of Modern Art's Architecture and Design collection, alongside Milton Glazer's Dylan poster and Richard Avedon's psychedelic photos of the four Beatles. Van Hamersveld later studied at the Chouinard Institute of Art in downtown LA, and in early '67 he joined Capitol Records Distribution Company as a designer of commercial record packages and marketing campaigns. He worked on artwork and campaigns for albums by Capitol artists, including the Beach Boys and the Beatles, over the year that he was there. And segueing from surf to psychedelia, John, while he was still at Capitol, started his own production company, Pinnacle Dance Concerts. And he oversaw the design of all of the psychedelic posters and light ships for all of the Pinnacle concerts that happened in '68 and '69. How many of them were there? 40, 50? Tons.
43 groups, probably 16 shows.
All of them stunning. And they included a memorable concert by Jimi Hendrix, and a poster which is on display here, and another one featuring Chuck Berry, which I hope John will tell us a story about. It's another great story. As the 12 by, edit. Through the 70s and into the mid-80s, Van Hamersveld went on to create memorable album cover design, poster art, billboard campaigns, and more for Jefferson Airplane, the Rolling Stones, the Doors' Jim Morrison, Kiss, Steve Miller, Blondie, the Grateful Dead, the Fabulous Thunderbirds, and Cream, to name but a few. And in the early 80s, as a 12 by 12 album cover format gave ways to CDs and the digital age, Van Hamersveld expanded his artistic universe far beyond the music industry, into business and the public sector. Among other projects, he designed the logo for Fatburger. He designed the official poster and mural for the 1984 Los Angeles Olympic Games. and the Viva Vision Signs of Life overhead screen for the Las Vegas Fremont Street experience. If you've ever seen that overhead in Las Vegas, stunning, stunning experience. And as a writer, John's published an autobiography recounting his many tales of surf, sex, psychedelia, and sound. It's titled My Art, My Life. It's published in 2010. It's available on Amazon, highly recommended. And his now immortal Johnny Face image from billboards and t-shirts from the 60s was a hit with skaters when he first cut a deal with Vans more recently to put him on a line of sneakers. And Vans also hired him to create a bunch of posters for the Vans offices. So there are large format John Van Hamersveld posters in the Vans offices. More recently, John and his wife Alida Post created Post Future, an art company website devoted to representing Van Hamersveld's myriad artworks, projects, and events. His large format public art projects include the colorful water tank right here in the Gundo. John's a member of a collective, an art collective calling themselves the California Logos, along with Southern California art visionaries Norton Wisdom, Chaz Bourquet, Gary Wong, and Dave Tourget. Tourget, in fact, created an acclaimed documentary about John titled Crazy World, Ain't It? It premiered in 2019. It was the official selection at the Santa Barbara Film Festival last summer, and it's on the circuit now. And of course, you know, Van Hamersveld is the consummate storyteller, so I need to throw it to him. John, take it away. John Van Hamersveld. There you go.
Okay, you can hear me? All right. Here we go. So I had a Bauhaus kind of education at Art Center College of Design, very formal design education, modernism. And so underneath my work is always the grid and primary solids and all that. But then I'd venture out into more colorful things later on in my career. So in 1984, everything changed to technology, entertainment, design, and called TED. You know, so I went to these original, TED conference and actually met Steve Jobs, and he had these little Macs there. And so here we are today with this phone, which is everything. This is the culture here. We kind of dial it up, and we use it every day. And so we reference it, and people ask about my album covers, and you look it up, you know, and there it is. So fascinating image. I went to Tokyo, or Little Tokyo, and had all the names done in kanji, and then the symbol at the bottom is a very powerful Japanese calligraphy thing. Norman Seeff took the picture, brought it over to the studio, didn't know what to do with it, and so I really surrounded it with this kind of influential, kind of early punk. And I always had a credit. You could see it on the phone. So Mick Jagger, he's probably a couple years younger than I, has a 23-year-old girlfriend and a 2-year-old boy. And they've been working for like 58 years. Unbelievable. And so I've been working for like a half a century. But within that, I did album covers for 20 years. And in that 20 years, it was really about the square. But the square then was an image, and then the image had to become billboards and pamphlets and magazine ads and all kinds of things within the trade and the record store. The record business, per se, from 1960 became a worldwide business by the 80s, and then all of a sudden it just collapsed. It went into the digital world. So within that 20 years, I had a good time. And last summer, we went to Greenburgh, Pennsylvania, and I had a show there. And so you could see all my larger art pieces and everything, but they demanded to have my album covers. So, and this is all new to me. I never really go back there. That's like 30 to 40 years ago. I'm in a completely different world now. So there it was, and there they are. So I did 300 album covers. Each year I had 17 projects, usually running at $250,000, going through the studio. And because I had the ability of taking photographs and being an artist and then being a designer. So within that, the variations had to be different. Each cover had to be different. So you don't know who did these things. You only know them by the credit if you can find it. And that's always way back in the bottom of the record cover. But each one is a very powerful message of the day. Every album cover tells a story. So in these 8 very famous covers, each one, I met people. I probably dealt with like 16 some odd services, a very political sort of scene. And sometimes I would never meet the group. It would just be with the manager and the girlfriends and people at the studio. So, but then I would have a Ferrari ride with Steve Miller out to his ranch in Portland somewhere. The Grateful Dead, they hate the cover. It's their best selling. And they say, who's this guy here? The devil, and this obscene finger there, and the joint, and what's this woman doing with the rose, playing the album cover? Let's see, the Blondie, the lettering just worked so well with Norman's photographs. He didn't know what to do with it, so I made it cockeyed, put a high-tech sort of grid that was the style in that day, and with that lettering, it was a powerful logo for them. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, Dylan was at the house for like 5 days or something like that. And the producer comes to the door's like a little bit open, and I've worked out this whole cover with Dylan, and he sees it and he says, "You're not going to do that." And what it was a kind of it was for the movie, so it was like a guy standing there with a makeup man putting a bullet hole drawing in his chest. I thought it was a magical picture, but the producer didn't like it, so we ended up just putting the lettering on the cover, and then the back had another photograph, which was great. Okay, we'll go on here. So Gaslight Anthem, I did recently. Took the photograph, flew all the way back to New York. They didn't like the photographic collage. They wanted something like the Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street, but they went with this photograph. It was taken in the back of the Museum of Modern Art. There was just a guy going by, and it just seems to really work really well. And then the name of the album was called Get Hurt, and we went through all kinds of combinations. And I was meeting with Milton Glaser, and so taking that and turning it upside down created a concept for them, and they took it on the road. It was on billboards and a mural in back of their stage. So in the beginning, here in El Segundo, I'm the surfer, and the artist. So the surfer went away on the weekends, and the artist came to the school and had 2 art classes a day. And it was the surf subculture, and I had left high school. So I had been to Art Center. Well, I graduated from El Segundo High School, went to Art Center, had this great education, was off one spring semester, and I told Rick Griffin I was going to do a surfing magazine in my bedroom. So I started up this magazine, and I have the support of Granis, who's a famous surf photographer, and Warren Miller, who wrote some stuff for it, and other kinds of things we picked up. And so it was really a magazine for the South Bay. And what happened is that John Severson saw the magazine and he got really upset. So he met me halfway in Long Beach, and we struggled over each other. And he decided that he wanted me to be his art director. So I started Surfer magazines. And then I went on to Surf Guide and did their famous issue. But the interesting part of the way it works is that you design a format, for the covers, and I've hand lettered the masthead there, or the Surfer magazine typography. So that whole thing I did for Severson, and he hated this. I took it over into The Endless Summer. So now I'm with Bruce Brown Films, his arch enemy. And there, of course, they don't understand the image per se. Where's the beach? Where's the sun? And we got kind of past that. They liked the lettering, the title, and then they wanted me to tell what the movie was all about and put Bruce's name on it. So that was all accomplished. It went out, and it was going around for about a year or so. So you can see how it's all pulled together. The photograph is taken, and then the line resolution is made. It's coupled together. It's an analogous color scheme. You can see how the primary solids from the modernist things hook together. You can see how color wheels work. And there we are. So in New York, they stripped off everything and made it the way it should be, and it became a product that sold across the nation in colleges and head shops. It became a psychedelic poster in the blacklight room. So it's collected by the Art Center College of Design and my other posters. This is at LACMA. You can see one of the older marquee posters, and at the Modern. So there I was, at 23, I think, 24, back in art school, and the Beatles were coming into view. Everyone had like 45 record players, these little boxes, and this LP comes with all these songs on it, and it becomes a party sort of music in the South Bay and in Dana Point too as well. So Derek Taylor is the guy who's taking the Beatles on tour, and we'll see him a little bit later here. So in the politics and the ironic, and being pulled into this kind of thing of being a surfer and have done a surfing poster that became a movie, gets sucked into Hollywood. And from there, I end up, in this weird position where it's a modernist thing, it's a poster from '66, and it's pop art. And someone gives me, a teacher friend of mine gives me a name to see a particular art director, George Osaki at Capitol Records, and so I end up going up the elevator to meet him. He shows me I show him the poster, and then he shows me a soundtrack album. And then he decides that I'm going to go up to the 8th floor. He gives me a call. I go up to see Brown Meigs. Brown Meigs looks at me and he says, "I'm going to hire you, and you can't turn me down." So, you come from the street up to the top, to the money maker, the distributor of Capitol Records, the guy who signed the Beatles to the label. He becomes my boss. I'm the art director to his dreams. So how that ended up being an album cover, I don't know, but it is a soundtrack. And when the movie was being circulated, one of the companies, put the poster on the cover. So I became a designer of album covers. Just absolutely strange, but I went with it. I was just an art student looking for a job. And and Brown Meg said, I'll pay you a good salary, and then I'll give you work after on your girlfriend's paycheck, something like that. We'll use her bank account to launder the money if you'll do the work for me. So I end up as an art director. So this whole kind of odd world of the hippie, the hippie modernist sort of came into view, and you could see how the album covers were sort of retrospective. Our culture in the 60s is sort of trying to show the background of an old world. So you're living in a Victorian house. It's not the the post-war housing that you grew up in. You're in the city. You don't have much money. You buy things at the supermarket, which is just a little tiny market on the corner in the city. And they're junk stores, and you buy your books and all that, and you have your record player, and that's your culture, this hippie culture. And you go to these love-ins, and you fly up to San Francisco and experience Haight-Ashbury. And Rick was there making posters for the Fillmore and all that. And so as I was going back and forth, I end up, in this strange position of doing the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour album cover. Weird. So Brown says, Brian Epstein has died, and he normally, through EMI, they send us pictures, these beautiful pictures of the Beatles. So what are we to do with this? Where is the Beatles? And he says, I can't sell this. It's just impossible. So I took it home and became the designer of the album cover, the one we see today. So this was all done overnight. And it was trying to, what Brown saw is that he could see that I could bring the psychedelia and the tune titles and all that and pull that together into an iconic image. So then my title, my name is not on the album because I did it at night and they wrote the check to my girlfriend and I cashed it. So starting Pinnacle. So again, we don't have any money and we're living in these Victorian houses. And I have this idea from Cal Arts or Chenard Cal Arts in doing happenings. And so we start this thing called Pinnacle. And in that, I'm trying to show the city, Los Angeles, the tower, the love-ins and all that, Electric Wonders. And so we throw this first show, which is absolutely incredible. I have two partners who do all the business work and work with the booking and with Bill Graham and Chet Helms of the Avalon. So all of a sudden we've united San Francisco with LA. We have this big hall. Takes in about 2,500 people, sometimes 3,000. But then when we had the Cream there, the parking lot had 2,500 people in the parking lot and probably 4,000 to 5,000 in the actual hall itself. And it had doors along both sides, of which you just hit this bar and the door would fly open and 20 people would come flying in. And the guards would run around and go crazy. It was just absolutely bedlam. There were polices there and everything. And, I'm being unbelievable scene just thought up out of my head. These are my two famous posters. Shepard Fairey worships the Hendrix poster. the Indian. I'm doing a book that's coming out called The Pinnacle Indian. These are the newspaper ads in the Free Press. So that was inside the hall. This is like one of the second shows, and you can see the screen that's put up against the wall there. And so through all of that, meeting all these different bands, I met the Blue Cheer, the loudest group in the world. And with Gut Turk, I did the cover with him. The Pop Art Experimental Band, A Child's Guide to Good and Evil. It looks like that, doesn't it? I met the Jefferson Airplane. Bill Thompson was the manager. So there's a crazy story that you'll read somewhere in my books about this meeting with Gracie and Paul on the bed there in Haight-Ashbury in their sort of antique building, the Tiffany House. And I'm showing the bomb to them, and they're trying to figure out what I'm doing. And they can't see it. They just don't get the concept that this is the baby boomers. So multimedia is what I really learned at Chouinard. And so it seems that between doing the dance hall and later we'll be seeing the 1,500-foot Viva Vision screen. And you can see how the work traveled from 1968 to 2010. But we always have to face our parents right in the middle of the scene, So here I am with the long hair, velvet pants, vinyl plastic shoes from, the rock star store. My sister's there. My mother can't even look at me. My father's saying, "What are you doing, What is this all about?" We're just having a little lunch in the backyard. And you can see all the old chairs from the junk store.
Who's the girlfriend?
The girlfriend, that's Hanea at the time. And she's worried. She would come around on the weekends. So the house was a Victorian, an old house, sort of a farmhouse in the middle on Kingsley and 5th Street. And my studio was in the loft there, which once was the studio of, we'll get to that slide. So I'm doing this Indian as a print, an art print. And I end up talking to, Brown Meggs, and Brown Meggs says, "So, what are you going to do now that Pinnacle's over? I see this Indian that you're doing. So what's up?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to go to London and see the Beatles." And he said, "Well, okay, I'll set that up for you." So I arrive in London, and Derek Taylor signs my visa, and then I have to get another signature, and that was from Alan Aldridge, who was John Lennon's art director. And I ride in Eric Clapton's Mini Cooper, and that's Brian Epstein's Mini Cooper. And so I'm having a great time for about 30 days or so, actually 3 months. And then I get this call from Derek Taylor, and Derek Taylor says, "Well, Beatles are over. Apple is closing." And I was really hoping to get some work there. It just didn't quite work out that way. Who would ever know that the Beatles were going to break up? So this guy, Alan Klein, comes in and takes away all their music and all their royalties, all their rights and everything. Does the same thing with the Stones, and there they are. So really, in a way, this get back to where you once belonged was really a very profound title of the day. It really gave you a sense of, where is this all going, this drug culture? What are we doing here? And so, through the royalties of the losses and everything, the Stones are in exile in 1971. They go to France. And it seemed like the scene was over. It was the end of an era for me. And I was looking back into the surf culture. You can see the Indian poster in the hallway there at John Severson's office. And it's 1969. So I've been, this is only like five years of work, just startling at the level I was working at. So there I am at the Bellevue studio in Elysian Park. Friends would come over, I would draw on that table, we'd have meetings, we'd drink tea. So what's going on? So I finally decide, well, okay, I'm gonna open a new office. So I rent a studio in the Chapman Park studio building, and I create another life for myself. And there was a hotel across the street that had a pool. So I was in their sauna and in the pool every day. And so as I kind of come out of all that, Denny Bruce comes around, and he has John Fahey with him, and it was Tacoma Records. And so we start a cover for Leo Kottke. And you can see Jack Nitzsche, who's always around, produces with the Stones. So again, another level of culture that I get pulled into. So here's Leo Kottke. So I took him up to Mount Wilson, took a photograph of him with the background of the smog from the sky down into the city that you couldn't see, it obscured. And the record cover was called Mudlark. So with Denny, I did a lot of different covers, probably 8 or 9, maybe 10 of them. The one I always like is the Magritte sort of derby, heated up, being frozen by icicles or ice cubes, called Ice Water, with a little drop at the bottom there. So I had to look at the studio and figure out how I could make an image that would work for me in the entertainment business. So I invented Johnny. So probably for like a year or so, everybody called me Johnny. And Johnny is sort of a character who is really from the past. He had all those experiences in the 60s. And so this is 1970. And so I was sending it around to all the different design offices and companies. And I met Norman Seeff. And Norman Seeff became like a partner, or we worked together on all these projects. And so he would come by the studio and he would give me phone calls and I would do work for him. And so I started drawing again and created these few album covers with him, but also working with him on his photos and doing typography. So the Johnny t-shirt takes off. And beans, the magical fruit, the more you eat, the more you toot. And then and Black Pearl is just so absurd and funny, but it was a Grammy nomination. So there I am with my Johnny buttons on my tuxedo, Hawaiian shirt with a bow tie, getting my award from Stan Freberg, I think it was. So we get this phone call. And it's Chris O'Dell. And I met her at parties at my house and also in London. She was Derek Taylor's secretary. So now she's the secretary of, and we're at a really high level here. She's the secretary of Mick Jagger, right? So we start Exile on Main Street. The person in the center there is Marshall Chess and Mick Jagger and Norman Seeff. So two crazy guys that I'm going to work for. So what I do is I meet Robert Frank and I sit down with Jagger and I work this all out with him. And he goes for it, So here's this face, this character with balls in his mouth, the Rolling Stones. And so the cover, goes out. Everybody hates it. They can't figure out what's going on. what are you doing with these freaks, you know? And it's so sloppy the way it's done. And Jagger did all the writing, which I then cut up and just pasted on the back with a couple contact sheets. Mick Jagger would do all of his lyrics on these little pieces of paper that he would carry around in his hand. And you could see how Robert Frank has gone with his camera and wrote down, or took pictures of these little sheets of paper. So here we are at Sunset Sound, and there's a billboard reflected in the window that's tilted back, and Mick Jagger and Jimmy Miller. So here we are. Mick Jagger likes my T-shirt, and I've created an ad campaign for him. And it looks like Charlie. And so I set up the billboard where this is Mick Jagger and Charlie, Bill, and what's his name, and Richards. And a wonderful sort of abstract, and taking those black and white photographs and colorizing them and using the typography. And I made the billboard 4 feet larger all the way around. So when you came up La Cienega onto Sunset, it just like pow. Very dynamic. So I leave Jagger with the shirt, and we move on into the world. And so John Lydon comes around. He likes the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street, and you can see how much the album was going for, $5.85, right?
Double album.
Yeah. So I take what I learned through Jagger, and I take that on to John Lydon, and then that becomes a great cover for the punk movement. And what he said about the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street is he felt that when he saw it, he felt that influenced the scene. So they just sort of pursued that kind of rough and tough graphic look. And that just expanded like wildfire, went everywhere. There's thousands of designers working in tape and rip and tear and Xerox machines. So 1984 is really the end of the square, the 12 by 12. The world has changed. MTV has taken over the advertising and promotion of records and bands. And the little cassette disc sits in there for $19. And the record companies are making more money than they ever did. And that was the end of the 12 by 12. Was over. So what do I do? Where do I go? So one of the first projects in '84 was working on the Olympic mural that wrapped 360 feet around the Coliseum. The Jimmy campaign, Jimmy Z, which is for the surf culture. And then I was over at LA Style magazine being the design director in the Marilyn Monroe issue that sold out, and they sold the company. Fatburger, I did the trademark, but I also did the buildings too. So I had learned from Saul Bass how gas stations were designed and worked out. And so I ended up learning that and then applying that to the hamburger business. So I did about 7 different designs, 7 different architectural forms with the logo. And today, that kind of small, I think we had like 60 stores, something like that. Now it's like 285 stores around the world, in China, Dubai. It's a crazy thing. So really, what they say about the logo itself is it's such an LA thing that it's almost as famous as the Hollywood sign. Then I go into this digital world in 2000, and I'm doing a digital movie, and I meet the Cream Reunion a little bit after that. And so with that, I start drawing again. So I'm doing my drawings. So this multidiscipline kind of world of being able to be a designer, an artist, and a photographer has worked out very well. So you see where Clapton likes the Hendrix poster. He sees that in the reunion. So the drawing and the typography, and I put the poster all together like that. It ends up being a postcard that was sitting on the seats at Royal Albert Hall. And so I put one of the postcards in a cassette box and gave it to Nigel, and he took it out to the Warner Brothers, and the guy there had the same thing. And so where they wouldn't pay me for this project, I was doing it for free. The company said, I told them I wanted 10,000 when they got the card on the DVD, and they said, we'll never pay that. So as it went on, I finally got a check for 10,000, something like that. But then I went on the road with these posters around the country, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And Lita and I were selling, Hendrix posters and Cream posters, and we did very well. We had a wonderful vacation for about a month and a half. We returned to LA. So there I was in 2009 in this position of wondering what was going to happen. The economy was starting to crash. We had a great time on our trip, and so we ended up going to Las Vegas to work with the Fremont Experience. And so in that, I was looking at these rugs, in the casinos, and they were so psychedelic. They were absolutely incredible. So in our business with the Fremont Experience, we ended up doing this big, giant digital animation project on a 1,500-foot screen. So to get through that, I took my 4 signs of life and then coupled that into this animation program. And then paced with the Zombies 2 songs, which was just fascinating what happened. So you see these gigantic projections of my images within the context of, it's not there, okay. There were a couple other pictures of the Fremont Experience images. So I ended up on the cover of Easy Rider magazine doing a show in Manhattan Beach with my posters. And then that sort of blew up into this other world of doing murals. And so within the murals, it went on and on through through publicity. And I ended up doing one for 14th Street in Hermosa Beach. And then that went to downtown LA at 7th and Figueroa. And then it went to the Bank of America. What an amazing thing being in front of a Calder sculpture like that. So the signs of life. So then that whole thing gets reorganized where I'm inducted into the El Segundo High School Hall of Fame. And the mayor comes over and she says, "Will you do a mural for us?" And I said, "Well, go talk to Alita." So about 3 or 4 months later, we're out at this rusted tank, and it's just unbelievable. It's like, what do you do with this thing? And so with an engineer and another company, we pull it all together and we make it work. And so up goes this fantastic mural, 510 feet around, 31 feet high. And you see it every day if you live here, going in and out to the beach. I did a mural for for the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium, and it was just Alita and I were listening to this sort of kind of conversation about the octopus as sort of taking psychedelics and loving each other, and so I kind of like made it a character, in the mirror with the fish going by and the birds and all that. So I drew a cat in my kind of portfolio of drawings, and I had a concept that was called Alley Cats, and so I did a mural in downtown Los Angeles, like 200 feet long, in sections, 6 feet high. And here at Spin, they're looking out over the proofs to make sure everything is right. So that's an image. And so in this digital world, being able to bring drawings and textures and colors and things and being able to pile them on top of each other, very much the way I would do the animated programming for the Fremont Experience back in 2009. So this was taken down recently, so it was up all year last year on Hope Street. Someone walking by with the cats, huh? And you see my work all the time on Google. Thank you.